I'm pretty amazed. I didn't figure there'd be a fourth as many bikes out there. Really great turnout, and everybody that's anybody's here. You know, it's just it's a fabulous fabulous event out here. I'm sure there's a lot of people sorry they didn't make it. So yeah, yeah. So history, you know that word HISTORY, history. Super important that we remember what we did. I think motorcycle racing is still great. Supercross, motocross, road race, and dirt track. But by golly, it is just not like it was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe early 80s. It's really different. It's not. It's like become kind of industrial or commercial or something. And I remember pictures of Clamfeth or talking with Dick Clamfeth, and he put his race bike in the back of, I think it was a Buick or something like that. It was in the back seat of his Buick. Took the seats out of it and drove to Daytona. And then he had a trailer that was made out of a pickup bed and all that kind of great rustic stuff, and it's just kind of all slicked up now, and it's wonderful. The show's great, and it's on TV, so hundreds of thousands of people can watch it. But so we got a panel up here of people that I think went through the glory days back when it was more difficult to race. It was hard to get sponsors. You probably weren't going to wind up on TV until we got guys like Dave Despain that did a killer job of bringing the sport to tens of thousands of people that could get it on their TVs. But so anyway, I got 4 simple questions, and there's no wrong answer, of course. And I think with 6 people up here, maybe just take a couple minutes, and before Greg gets a hook out and shut you down, but. We'll try to get some good impressions. So, Greg, do you want to start off with the question about Mathias, maybe like a little bit of what experiences there were?
Yes, sir. And I forgot to mention Billy Kennedy also raced at Mathias.
Okay.
But we had Don Mathias up here. It was fabulous. We had Scott Baer. It talked about Mathias was a great weekly track. But you guys who raced and won here, I know Steve. I know raced at the scrambles track and the short track. But just kind of your thoughts about when you came to Mathias. I think all of your careers were on the way up. It was a great place to come and learn at. But just a mention of what you remember about coming and racing at Mathias Raceway.
Yeah. Steve, you want to take it?
Well, I'll start out. I mean, at the time, I was probably 12, 13 years old, so my parents would take me to amateur races, and Mathias was one of the premier facilities that we had to go scrambling racing. And I just remember riding on the TT track. You'd run up on the side of the hill and down, and I mean it had a lot of terrain built right in the facility, and the short track was nice as well. But between there, Mendon, Ohio, Greenville, Ohio, we were very fortunate that our grassroots, we had a real strong program. Honda Hills, for an example, that we could go amateur racing anywhere in the state of Ohio any given weekend. So that basically started my career and got us going.
Do you think that the scrambles and the TT and all that helped you later with your career, the variety of places you went to? And
well, I did. I rode a lot of scrambles tracks, which we call TT tracks. But we'd go to Peoria, which was a TT track. I sucked. Wasn't my favorite place, but I did a lot of that stuff growing up. I don't know if I forgot how to do it or it just. The competition and the pro level is so much better.
I only raced Mathias a couple times, but the first time I went up there, I was staying with my grandpa. He lived in Zanesville, and we had just got matter of fact, the TT500 I've got over there, we got that frame, and we got it all put together, and we went up there, and we ended up winning that night, and it was really, really neat because he spent all this time making spacers and all kinds of bolts and nuts and axles, and we got everything together and went up there, and I ended up running third on the 250 class, and then I won the open class on the TT 500. And it was a fun track. It was really neat. We had a gentleman, and I forget his name now, but he had a 360 bull taco, and he wanted me to practice on it. He was a big guy, and I said, "Did you change the gears or jetting or anything?" And he said, "Nah, you'll be okay." And I went out there and run 2 laps and seized it up. So but it was a lot of fun. But I only rode there a couple times.
I run Mathias. 1980, Smitty Harley Davidson was sponsoring me on the 250 Harley Davidson, and I went his shop a lot, and he was like, you've got to go over to Mathias. I've helped a lot of kids over there, and I said, well, okay, I've never been there, but we'll go there. So we went over there one night, and I won the 250 class that night, and that was the only time I run. So it was a good little track, good little starter short track, and but Smitty's the one that took me over there and introduced me to it.
Yeah, I remember reading the write-up that I found in Cycle News, and they said, first year pro, Tammy Kirk was there with your dad.
Yeah.
And they said, well, she didn't really show very much in the heat, and the guys weren't really too impressed, but she came back to win the main event.
Well, I've never been there, so you got to learn how to run the racetrack. And that was my story.
And your bull taco leathers fooled a lot of people. People said, boy, that's a fast bull taco.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, we didn't have no money, and my dad had owned a bull taco shop, and that's what I always rode, but we never could get them to finish races. They always seized, and we had a lot of trouble with them. So Smitty seen me at Daytona, and we were having bike trouble, and he asked me, he said, would you like to ride my motorcycle? And I said, well, sure, So we got his 250 Harley, and my daddy was a really good mechanic, and he got the 250 running really good, and we ended up winning the Ohio State Championship in 1980 on that. So really good thing.
Well, it's really cool that a girl from Georgia has such a strong tie-in with West Virginia with Smitty out of Moundsville. I always thought that was pretty awesome. Which is on your tank of your XR.
Yeah, Smitty, him and Martha were just really good to us. I mean, they actually bought my first XR 750 for me, and give us parts and took care of us my whole career and professional.
Well, I rode Mathias. I knew Hugo Mathias real well, and George Singler, which a lot of you know in Ohio, was a mechanic for my dad, and he rented the Mathias Raceway 1 year, and we had races there, and I helped put the races on. But I rode the hare scrambles and the short track and the TT. I can't say that I ever won anything there. I did win one night, but I'm not going to talk about that. And my brother was riding then, and I told him, I said, he said, if you think you can do better, go ahead. And I had managed to still fit in his leathers then, so. But anyway, yeah, it was a great place for people to learn. They kept the track excellent all the time. It was well-groomed. They had really good hare scrambles there. You went up in the woods and back and around, and it was just a real fun place, and it's just a shame we don't have more places like that. I think that would help the motorcycle industry to still be strong if we had more places like that.
And I hope Mark doesn't mind me. I just chime one more in. Being grown and lived in West Virginia my whole life, we don't have a lot to crow about in West Virginia, but the Kennedys have a big West Virginia connection. Bill Kennedy Sr. from Rosedale, West Virginia. He said like population 104. Bill Kennedy has association with this track. He was involved with the local thoroughbred at a horse training facility and became a jockey at a young age. Bill Kennedy Sr. raced horses at Pennsboro Speedway at the fairs here until he hit growth spurt and got too tall. Also, I would be remiss, Dave Estep. We're fortunate enough to have Joanne here today. Dave Estep was from the Ripley area in West Virginia. So, we have some good claims to fame. Bobby Hill from Triadelphia up around Wheeling. I know High claims him, but that ain't true. He's from West Virginia. So, we're thrilled to have this here. A great representation for the state, and just thrilled to have these folks here today. So, Mark, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much.
All right. Yeah, so another question here, Steve, and for the rest of you. So I would imagine that you were a motorcycle rider, and then something happened. You got around somebody or some situation.
A pro racer, or what are you talking about?
Well, no, the first time when you're just a punk.
Oh,
You know, and you go racing, somewhere. And
well, I started riding a bike when I was 8 and racing one when I was 10, but it was a 100cc Hodaka. We didn't have mini bikes or the little bikes that you built in shop class. I mean, you had to buy an 80cc Yamaha or something like that. My father, he would race on the amateur level, and at that particular time, there was probably 7 or 8 guys from my hometown, Findlay, Ohio, that would go and compete on the amateur level. Well, I'd go with them every weekend and kind of figured out what the flags meant, when to go, when to stop. White flag, one more lap, and so I'd got a 100cc Hodaka, and he took the seat off it and put a board on it and put a little cover over it to where I could half-ass touch the ground on it, and I'd go out and compete, on that thing week in and week out. And I met some of my lifelong best friends, Scott Drake, Mike DeWeese. We all grew up racing together. Ricky Campbell, at the same period of time. We all come up through the amateur levels into the pro ranks to, get our career going at that particular time.
so your dad was a racer.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
cool, good. Yeah, it's a good influence.
Yes, he took care of me, and he would go to work to fund everything, and we'd go to Galion, Ohio, and run on Friday night. My brother Mike and I, and my mother, she would drive this little Ford Econoline van, and she would take us, and we'd unload the bikes, and we'd race, and it was a family affair. But it's just the wonderful people that I met through my career, starting out, like I said, when I was 8, 10, and like I said, growing up with Scott and Mike, and it was just amazing that we're still friends today, and we have such passion, the fun things that we did, in our life together.
Very good, thank you.
I'm a little different than most people. I never had a motorcycle until I was 22. Married, couple kids, full-time job. I had an older brother that used to build all of Bart Markle's race bikes. I mean, all of them, road racers, dirt, half mile, short track bikes, all that stuff. But I never was around motorcycles, and my brother's 4 years older than I am, and I was always in the way. We never had a whole lot to do with each other. But now and then he would call and say, "Hey, I'm going to the races. You want to ride along?" So I'd go, and I used to see Carol Restweber go, and back in Bart's early days. But anyway, one day he was going to a scrambles. At the end of the dirt track season, he had one of Markle's 250 TT
Put that
bikes.
right up here. Talk straight into it.
Pardon?
Talk straight into that microphone. Like tip it up like this.
Anyway, I went to a scrambles with him one day. It looked like ice cream cone here. Anyway, he had one of Bart's TT bikes at the end of the season. He was going to go to the local scrambles, and I went along with him watching the races there one day. And he said, "Hey, you want to ride this thing?" And I said, "Yeah, I like riding it around the pits and up in the hills." And holy cow, this could be a lot of fun. I never had a motorcycle. I was into hot rod cars at the time. Oh, anyway, on the way back home, I'm thinking I'm going to go get me one of these motorcycles. I sold my hot rod the next week, and at Cummings Harley Davidson, where a lot of guys raced out of, went and bought a new Harley Sprint. Rode it on the street for a couple of weeks, and looking behind me all the time, wondering who the heck's going to run over me. And finally, I started stripping it down and went to scrambles about half mile up the road, and they had a half mile at the local fairgrounds an hour north of me, so I took it up there. I didn't know anything, about gearing or anything. I just rode it the way it was. Ended up second. Smiled all the way home, and they only had 3 races in the whole state of Michigan that year. So I'm reading cycle news now quite often. I said, "Man, it looks to me like a guy go to Ohio every weekend and race one of these things." So I started working at Cummings Harley shop part-time, assembling motorcycles, and never got a paycheck. They just racked up a bill, and they'd order me a tank or a wheel, or pretty soon I had a CR Sprint race bike. So I got a novice license and headed to Springfield, Ohio, and ended up winning the thing by about 1.5 feet is all. And that's it. That's where it started. But I don't have a background before that. I mean, it's kind of an overnight deal, you know. But that's my story.
I didn't get started till I was like 17. Hung out at the local motorcycle shop, and they were a bunch of bench racers. You know, I looked up to them. They were the best, you know, to hear them talk. And so they built a track at Cedarville, a local town there next to Xenia. And I was hanging out there, and a guy said I could ride his bike, so I pushed it, never did start. It was a Honda 350, and it just wouldn't run. And finally, the owner of the motorcycle shop told me I could ride his 250 Suzuki. So I did, rode that, and that was the beginning of my racing career. I was 17, raced against Morehead, was competitive with him, and he was going to turn pro that next year, so that's when I turned pro, and that's how it started.
My grandpa raced on the board tracks. He had rode motorcycles all his life. And my dad rode, but he just rode, always had bikes, but he just dirt rode, just out trail riding and stuff. But he used to take me to Ascot every weekend when I was 8 and 9 years old. And every single Friday night we'd go watch at Ascot, either the half mile or TT. And halfway, every weekend we'd go down to the pits, and my dad would talk to Mert Allwell, and I would get his autograph every time Mert was there. About halfway through the 70 season, when Mert was number 1, we went down. I got his autograph. He was talking to Dad, and he looked at Dad and I and said, "I'm going to take you guys to dinner next week." And here I am, a 9-year-old kid. He's national number 1. And I thought, wow, he's just saying that. So next week we went to the races. Mert won the main event. We went down there. I got his autograph. He goes, "You guys ready to go? I'm taking you guys to dinner." And Mert Lawwell, national number 1, took us to dinner. And at 9 years old, I was like, I can't believe this. This was unbelievable. And so we moved to Virginia. And when I was 12, my dad got me an XR75, and he said, "You want to go race Portsmouth Stadium?" And I said, "Yes." And I went, and we ended up third that night on a stock XR75, and then that's what started it. But my grandpa, my dad, and Mert Lawwell were the big influences on getting me started.
Yeah, this one speaks a little louder, don't it? My dad was an influence on me. We had a bull taco dealership right out beside our house. It's just in a garage. And every day I was out there working with my dad doing something. I was the kid that he couldn't run off. But I started riding when I was about 4 years old, and just rode. He used to sponsor racers. Roger Crump was one of the main ones that he helped, and they always kept saying, you need to race. And I was like, oh, no, I just want to ride. So I rode, and then eventually they talked me into racing. And I won my first race, and then I was hooked ever since.
You won the first race?
First race I ever won. Yep. First race I won it. Was actually at a motocross. It was at Cohutta Motocross. And then we had a flat track there in Dalton. It was called Dalton Raceway, and that's where, like I say, Roger and all the other guys that my dad used to help. And then he bought me an SL70 after that. My first race, believe it or not, was a Trail 70. So running on a motocross. So who would think you could ride one of them on a motocross? But anyway, I did, and then he got me an SL70, and we started flat tracking, and I love the flat track. I run motocross to start with, but I didn't care a whole lot about it, and after we did the SL70, got the XR75, and then just went from there.
How old were you when you won that first race?
9 years old.
Natural talent.
I'm not sure.
my story's a little different. I was born into this. My dad was a Triumph dealer, 1961 in Elyria, Ohio. He was second Yamaha dealer east of the Mississippi. And of course, in them days, motorcycle shops, their big deal was speed tuning. And my dad before that was in the Air Force, and he was stationed in Utah at Hill Air Force Base, and he was won the national hill climb. She said there was only one guy in the hill climb he couldn't beat, and that was right here in West Virginia, and that was Dave Easton, because he was a hill climber too. But got the shop and of course started promoting races. They built a racetrack, a local TT Scrambles track. But I more worked in the motorcycles all through when I was old enough, I was washing parts. I mean, a lot of guys rode for my dad. National number Lenny Waldo, national number 70. Of course, Ronnie rode for Dad from 64 on the TT bikes, and then rode the Triumph from 69, I think, to 73. And I worked on the bikes all the time with Dad. He would bring them in, I would tear them down and meticulously clean everything, and then he would put them back together. So I didn't ride a lot of sportsman stuff. I was busy going to nationals and going to races with Ronnie. And I stayed at the Penny Farm quite a little bit, and we rode at the track that Norbert, I think he said something about him and Ronnie built the little short track. I finally got to where I could keep up with Ronnie and sometimes beat him. And Ronald says, you need to get your license. So that's how I ended up kind of going pro. I was real happy just working on motorcycles. In 71, the thrill was on there. That was probably one of my favorite years because Frenchie LeBlanc rode for my dad as a junior, and Ronnie rode for Dad as an expert, and they won. Ronnie won like 13 main events in a row, and Frenchie won one more, 14 in a row. So we were really, it was really fun for me to work on them and watch them win. And then it was fun just to go riding too.
You're a little younger than Ronnie?
Oh yeah, I'm a lot younger though.
Learned from a master. Well, a couple of you have already kind of touched on it, I guess, but what's your most memorable moment, when something really big happened to you in motorcycling in general? Not necessarily racing, but probably in racing. Yeah, tell us about that. I mean, Steve, you ran right through it, became an AMA exec. You're running the dirt track program, right? I mean, that's like kind of a really cool natural progression. I mean, it shows that you weren't just a great racer. You had a grasp of the sport. Maybe the kind of the commercial side of it. Understood the factories, the riders' opinions. You kind of had to. That was the real troublesome thing about working at the AMA was all these different masters you had. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of armchair quarterbacks out there, But no, my career, I raced professionally on the expert level for 26 years. Give it up in 99 was my last season. The last race of the year was the DuQuoin Mile. I decided, all right, I won the last race I ran. I'm going to quit. I'm done with that sport and walk away from it. Well, over the course of the winter, Will Davis was talking to Scott Hollingsworth, who was the CEO at the time. I said, boy, I think it'd be a great move since Steve's quitting. Maybe if you can bring him on board as an operation guy or do something. Because, he's very vocal at our writers' meetings and everything that goes on. You're doing wrong, and, he's got some fairly decent ideas, and he's willing to listen to the rest of the paddock here on the direction we need to go. So, long story short, they brought me on board in 2000, and now 25 years later, I'm still at the racetrack, all these years, doing a racing for 26, being on the AMA side another 25 years, so I've never honestly left the racetrack, my whole career. So I've seen a lot of things come and go, and the changes over the years, and the way the sport, is doing this, and the production bikes, the race-only bikes, and going to the motocross bikes, where we always, back in the day, we'd get a hold of Jack Warren and say, send me a gas tank, a seat, I need a frame, a wheels. We was able to build these motorcycles in our garage if your dad could run a lathe or help you assemble these things. That's just the way it was back in the earlier years. And now it's a production base to where if I can't go to a dealership and buy the motorcycle, I can't race it. So if I go to my Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, KTM dealer now, if I'm a singles rider, buy different forks and wheels and tires and lower the motorcycle, and you go out and race it. It has made it more competitive. And going back to the production-based rules, whether it's twins or singles, the idea is to get the dealer involvement back in the sport again, you know, to help take it to the next level. You know, it's the sad part in today's world is everything is streamed. I can watch it on my phone. You know, you got Fans Choice, you got Dirt Vision, you got Flow Sports. I don't have to go to the racetrack anymore. My refrigerator's over here, my bathroom's here. I can tune in and watch these racing events live. And in my eyes, I mean, it's hurting us in the long run because of that aspect, because it's so easy, you know, to stay home and watch the race. You know, it's back in the day, it's like, okay, it's a sunny day, honey, we're going to get the motorcycle out, we're going to Springfield, Illinois, and we're going to watch the mile. Well, shit, it's gray and gloomy. What do you want to do today? Well, we'll stay home. So, I mean, and nowadays you're competing for the entertainment dollars. There's just so much things to do for young kids nowadays, you know, other than worrying about going to a daggone motorcycle race and all. So we have to find that formula to help set the hook, you know, and revive the sport no matter what it is, you know, to create interest and keep the people coming. So being on the other side of the fence as operation guys for the American Flat Track Series, you know, it is tough. You know, those are all my ex-racing competitors. It's their kids out there that that are picking up the pace and that are racing, and there is so much great talent coming up through the singles class nowadays. But we had to come up with a platform for them to want to go to the next level. Why do I want to move up and be a twins rider? You know, because I don't have an Indian motorcycle, I can't get one. So you got to come up with a platform to where now the production-based bikes, Honda, Kawasaki, Yamaha, Suzuki, KTM, and the Harley-Davidson XG, well, hopefully that'll, you know, everything will set and the dealer involvement will come back, and it's going to take time to rebuild it. But it's the direction I feel that we need to go, and I think that's something that the sport has needed for years.
Good to hear.
What was the question?
What was one of the really exciting things that happened to you in your life related to motorcycles?
Oh boy, well, mine's going to be completely different, I guess, than Steve's. I was an junior amateur, they called him, 66 at the Springfield Mile on a KR, rigid frame. Never been on a mile. Taking coaching from my brother who had been around a whole lot. And we had, back in those days anyway, the throttle didn't have to self-close. The throttle was set, you're going to run down the back straightaway. We had two little clip-on handlebars on the forks. Whoops. Had two little clip-on bars on the forks. You let go of the bars and grab it. He said, I don't want to see you setting up till the front end takes off down on the other end. I said, no, wait a minute. I said, I think your butt will fit on this seat better than mine, you know. And anyway, out in practice, and he always wanted to kill the motor down the back straightaway because they wanted to read the spark plugs all the time. So anyway, I'm coming down the back straightaway, last lap of practice, and the chain broke. So off I go into number 3 corner with no brakes, no engine braking, nothing. Never been on a mile before. Face shield flat out against your nose, eyes this big around, and oh my God, I made it through the corner, come around 4, and there's a big AMA official standing down at the pit gate waving his arms like this is where you go in, and I come down. I went right on by him, I couldn't stop it. He's hollering at me and swearing and everything else. I had to go back and apologize. But anyway,
that's exciting.
If you've never been in that position, I don't think you want to be with no way to slow down at all. Rigid frame, long Schwinn bicycle handlebars on the bike. That's my memorable moment.
All right, very good.
I guess mine was the first race that I got to after talking to all those guys at the dealership, how good they were and how fast they were. I lined up for the first race I was in, and the guy beside me was one of those guys, and he said, "You little MFer," he said, "if you get in my way, I'm going to run over your ass." And I ended up lapping him twice and won the race.
Excellent.
I would say the best one for me is I ended up winning a regional in Marion, Ohio. And after the race, Bert Shepard took a picture, and it had my grandpa, my mom, my dad, my wife, and my best friend Mike Seaball all in the same picture. And I've got that up on my wall. That was just a whole 3 generation of Erickson racing people in one picture. It was pretty neat, really neat.
Very good.
I guess my most memorable moment riding a motorcycle was in 1983 at Knoxville. Well, it's actually Knoxville, Tennessee, Maryville, Tennessee, Smoky Mountain Raceway. That was the first high bank track that I was used to running on, and I was like at home. And it's my second year as a national expert. And in practice, I was flying. I was going up high and coming down, and just flying in practice. And then I ended up, the racetrack had dried out some, and when I went up high and I went down low, it was dry. I got sideways, and next thing I knowed, I hit the wall in the front straightaway. It threw me up in the catch fence. My motorcycle the handlebars was just perfect at the height of the concrete wall down there. It went all the way down the front straightaway, went down to the turn 1, turned in the pits, went down right by the side Tex Peel, and fell over. And I had messed my neck up bad that night. I had knocked 2 vertebrae out of my neck and not knowing it, but that later I knew what happened. But that night I ended up making my first main event. So quite an adventure.
Man, yeah. Glad nobody caught that on video, huh?
That's not a fair question because there's so many hundreds of great memories for me. But one night, sticks out in my mind, Stevie was riding for us, and I was a junior and he was the expert. And we went to a regional in Henderson, Kentucky. And we were pretty much the underdogs. The Harleys by 75 were pretty fast. And I went out, set the fastest time. Stevie went out and broke that time. I won my heat, he won his heat. I won the main and he won the main. And my dad was really a happy guy.
Yeah. So if you think back to all your time in this sport, from the time you were a punk washing parts to, somebody like Steve still in it as a professional. Think of somebody, a person who, man or woman, in any part of the sport that you think you really continue to look up to them. They're, an important guy. Like we watched a Dick Mann movie last night. There's another guy who's real centric to whatever motocross, dirt track, road racing. But, think about somebody that you just think of as this kind of a star in the motorcycle racing world that, somebody who kind of means something to you, whether they're still on Earth or gone.
It's another tough one. It's my inspiration. The first pro race I'd ever went to watch, while I was still amateur, was Lime, Ohio, and I seen George Roeder, out there competing. I thought, man, I watched George flinging around out there and Ronnie Rawl on these Ohio pea gravel racetracks. I thought, man, that's what I want to do. I want to be those guys. And it was fun. I mean, they were big fish in little ponds around in the state of Ohio, and I wanted to be that guy. But then, the overall big picture of everything, I mean, you get to thinking about, all the greats in this sport that's made it, that's come and gone. And, it's just hard to pick, that one guy because everybody's got a story. you know, and to be able to tap in on them storylines and follow, whether it was Burt Lawwell, you know, the On Any Sunday movie with Malcolm Smith. You know, guys like that were very inspirational, you know, to me, and think, well, that's really cool. You know, I want to be that guy someday. So I'd have to say that's where I'll go with my direction.
Good.
Well, like I say, I was pretty old when I got into this sport, and my brother built all of Markle's race bikes. So I guess at the time Bart would have been somewhat of my idol. But when I got into this pro stuff there, being a novice, and then into the junior class, and just about everybody with a national number I was pretty enthused about. I said, that's what I want to get. I want to get at least a national number. So, but I admired all those guys, Ronnie Rawl, and especially the guys in Ohio that rode the cushions. They put on a big show. I like that. I learned to ride like that later on, but I lost my thought here. Boy, it's hell getting old.
So Burt Markle was he was an early inspiration.
I watched Bart a lot, and my brother would tell me, Bart used to fall off all the time, and my brother, of course, had to fix a motorcycle. And Bart a lot of times fell off so often that a lot of times he'd be sliding and tried to get up before he ever stopped. And I don't want to be like that. But anyway, I was stuck on trying to get a national number. That was the goal. And I ended up with a national number for being High Point Junior. 66, I had a national number when I was a rookie. And I thought, holy cow. But anyway, I won a few races on it, KRs and Expert. Matter of fact, the first race I won, the first time I beat Ronnie, was on a KR at Troy, Ohio. And I think he was riding one of Kennedy's Triumphs that night. We all high-load the corners. I call it, make the track look like a football, you know. Ronnie was good at it. But that night at Troy, for whatever reason, I run high all the way around the racetrack. And I looked back, and Ronnie was squaring off the corner. And I said, man, he's not catching me. I'm not changing, you know. But anyway, that's the national number, what I was looking for, and I got it. And later on, I was making a few bucks, and I living in a mobile home. I said, I'm going to build a house. I don't know nothing about nailing 2x4s together, but that's what I'm going to do. So I ended up building my house later on, I rode a Norton with quite a bit of success, and I ended up building my house with that motorcycle. Now, there again, I tell you, don't think I live in no Taj Mahal or nothing, but the house I live in.
With the money you were winning.
Yeah.
Starting out at the scrambles, and all you heard about was Steve Morehead. And, you know, he was the fast guy in the scrambles, and he's my idol.
That was easy.
Well, mine's definitely easy. It's got to be Mert Lawwell. When I was the 9-year-old and took me out to dinner, that was something. But then we moved away, and we came back to my grandpa's house, and we went to Indianapolis to watch the mile. I was 11. And after the races, we went down to the pits to see Mert, and I figured he probably doesn't even remember me. We came up there, and he started talking to my dad, said my name, and let me sit on his XR at 11 years old and took a picture. And that was just unbelievable for him to do that for a 9 and then an 11-year-old kid. You know, that was really, really neat.
Well, I guess mine was my dad, and then like I say, Roger Crump was always like a brother to me, and he was racing, and you know I was only 9, and he was I would say probably 18, 19 years old, so that would have been my hero.
Again, that's a tough question. I started going to nationals in '64 with my dad as just a kid, and I knew everybody, Bart Markle, Dick Mann, on a personal basis all through my life, so it's hard, but I gotta say, my dad is probably my hero as far as looking up. He, Triumph dealer, And we would work all winter long to get a horsepower, or maybe 2 horsepower. Change cams, flow heads, everything. And then we would go to the race and start winning, and he'd start telling everybody what we did. And it used to just infuriate me. I'd say, hey, we're here to beat these guys. He'd say, Will, I'm a Triumph dealer, and my goal is to see 5 Triumphs on, or 10 Triumphs on the main instead of 1. So that was probably, he has to be my hero.
That's great. So, would you want to talk about favorite tracks? I mean, we're kind of right here in the eastern part of the Midwest, I guess. You want to tell us your favorite track? What you like about it? The surface, the crowds.
Well, I got to go with Lima, Ohio, because it's 30 miles from where I live, so it's basically my home track. But back in the old days, of us growing up, you could race 35 times in the state of Ohio because everybody had a county fairgrounds. Whether it was pea gravel, limestone, racetrack, and that's what we grew up and raced on. But unfortunately, in today's world, and even on the national circuit, we race 1 pea gravel racetrack a year, and it's Lima, Ohio. So everything's clay based that we run on. So to get the tradition of going back to the old fairgrounds and running, that was my favorite. But I like the mile tracks myself. The speed, the closeness. It's like racing. The drafting that's involved. It's hard to believe how much air comes off the back of that little tail section that's 6-7 inches wide on the back of a motorcycle, and it's a high-speed chess game to where you can come from 4th to 1st on one straightaway. It's a lot of testing to see who can accelerate who. Some guys you pull out to pass and draft, and shit, I can only get to their foot peg. I can't go by, so I get behind that guy and let him tow me to the front. So I think just the mathematics and the strategy of the mile track racings was always my favorite.
Well, I don't think I really had a favorite racetrack, but mainly anything that had a 2-inch cushion on it, I felt really at home. Back in my day, when I was going fast, we didn't have any brakes to start with, so the groove racetracks, I was lost. Some of them I didn't even go to. I'd stay home and work on the house. But if it had a cushion, I was probably there. Troy, Ohio was nice. Lima was nice. Kenton, Ohio. Marion, Ohio. The list goes on. They all had a cushion on them, and I felt pretty much at home on those things.
So is that the horse people that kind of dictated what those surfaces turned out to be? They had their preferences.
Well, most of the places I was at, the horse people and the motorcycle people were at odds,
Yeah.
It seemed like.
I just think all of them were good tracks. They were all good experiences, and most of the Ohio tracks were the best around, back then, and there was a lot of competition, and I just have to say all the tracks were my favorite.
I'm kind of agree with Jack. I like anything that had a cushion on it. I was a cushion guy. But you could go to just about any track in Ohio that we used to run, and it was fun. Greenville, Lima, Marion, any of those. There was a couple tracks in Indiana that were deep, and Frederick, Maryland was a fun track. It was different, but it was deep, and those are just the ones that are fun to ride.
Well, I guess mine was, I always loved to run the mile tracks. Back then when I was racing, I only weighed 120 pounds, so I was really small, riding an XR 750 that weighed 320 pounds, so I couldn't manhandle it. So I had to finesse it and do it with balance. So half mile tracks were not, I run them and done decent when I run Ohio every weekend, but we got to where later on we couldn't afford to go to Ohio every weekend. And I just run the nationals, and I just love the mile tracks. And DeCoin and Springfield were my favorite.
For me, it was Louisville, Kentucky, hands down. It was a cushion track most all the time. I had a really good finish there. In '75, when I was a junior, they didn't have juniors at the nationals. It was only invitationals. So we got invited to, if you was a fast enough junior, you got to go. And I got second there, and always doing good on the Triumph there, but broke every time as an expert. So broke the crankshaft there. Daggone it.
Greg, you want to see if anybody's got any questions in the audience of enthusiasts out here? Anybody got a hot question for our panelists?
That is correct. His question was, did I get to drive a NASCAR Craftsman trucks? Yes, sir, I did. I retired in '89 from motorcycles and went into car racing. My dad wanted me to get off a motorcycle because he knew the law of average is going to run out. You're going to get hurt bad. So we went into car racing, and I raced all pro cars from I think 91 until 96. In 97, I rode for Jeff Bodine in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. And then I went on up, and 2003 was my last year. It was in that now Xfinity. Back then it was the Busch Series.
That's not that long ago. 20 years. First woman to run that series. Wow, all right. Question here?
Question for Steve Morehead. You ran sprint cars and bikes at the same time. What both of those make you walk sideways if you got hurt in either one of them? And which one did you like the best?
A sprint car was the most fun I ever had in my life. I was just very fortunate that, living in Findlay, Ohio, we could race like Attic on Friday night. I could go race my bike on Saturday and then haul ass back home to run Millstream Speedway there in Findlay on Sunday. And then other weekends we could, that were off, I could run Fremont, Ohio. And it got to the point that all my friends were out at the racetrack racing cars. So I'd go out there on an off weekend. I'm sitting there, well, this is bullshit. They're out there having all this fun. I want to try that. And Jack Hewitt, he was always one of my heroes. And watching guys like that, out there run. So a local guy, Doug Stoss, there in my hometown, he offered me a ride in his sprint car, and I drove that a handful of times one year, and then just kind of escalating into more, and thought, well, okay, I gotta end up getting my own car because I can't commit to drive for somebody else full time, so I could just hit and miss and run my own race car. Well, it was all right, but owner and operator wasn't a real good thing. But it actually taught me, because at that particular time we started running a lot of car tracks on the two wheels on the motorcycles, and we used to run around these holes. And I'd watch guys like Jack and Ferkel and some of the other guys around home. Well, shit, I found out there's moisture in the bottom of that hole. That they would hit, they'd run through it, and they'd run the cushion and enter on the cushion properly, and really taught me an awful lot, and it enhanced my motorcycle career, I think, because when we started running the car tracks, shit, I started doing a lot better.
Steve's best season is 1994 for somebody that turned expert in 74. It's pretty remarkable. And we talked about that because of what you learned from the cars. Finished third in the Grand National Championship in 94.
Well, Hagerstown Speedway, like I said, we just took on a lot of car tracks, that particular year, and being able to read the surfaces and pay attention more to what the track was doing, being able to read it, and that helped out. But it's in any world, it's all about consistency. You got to finish what you start, and being consistent through that year, worked out very well for me. So.